Now, it happens that in my lifetime, the greatest biblical archaeological discoveries in the last 2,000 years were made in my lifetime, and I was an adult. The first of the discoveries were the Gnostic Gospels, 1945. They were discovered. They didn't come into print until fairly recently because of the politics, academic corruption, the story. There are now 6 books on the corruption that led to the publication of the Gnostic Gospels. And so they are fairly recent. The same amount of corruption applies to the second biblical archaeological discovery, which has changed our concept of the Bible entirely. The extent to which this occurred, I'm going to show you presently. That is the Dead Sea Scrolls, 1947. And then the third discovery, the most shocking of all, was discovered in the 1970s, the Gospel of Judas, but it did not come into print until about 10 months ago. That is for the same reasons: academic corruption, academic jealousy, academic warfare. And so therefore these texts have all been suppressed. I'm not going to deal with this subject at all. I suggest you not read on it, despite the fact there are many books available on the subject. Now, I'm going to begin by giving 3 quotations from the Gnostic Gospels. Perhaps you will be as baffled as I am. The first quotation is, "Look to yourself and see if you have yet arisen." Now, that's it. You all understand this clearly? If you do, please explain it to me. Now, what does it mean? Now, I'm going to do a translation. The Gnostic Gospels come to us, all of them come in the Coptic language. This is the language of the Christians in Egypt. They are all translations from this language, Koine, biblical Greek. And so the verb arisen that I just quoted for you, look to yourself to see if you have yet arisen, is the verb anastasia. In biblical Greek, this is the word. I'm giving you the original word. This is the word that occurs in the 4 canonical Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, for resurrection. And the duplication of that word is intentional. Therefore, what I've quoted to you asks you, if you have yet arisen means, have you yet been resurrected? I'm going to explain that, but I'm not going to explain it because I cannot. It evades the rational processes, and this is characteristic of the whole Gnostic tradition. I'll explain this word Gnostic in a moment. But it is anti-rational. There are 52 Gospels which have now been translated. There are about 30 or 40 more to go. These are all recent discoveries. They have changed completely the history of Christianity. That's a very strong statement. I'll repeat it. They have changed completely the history of Christianity. When I began to study these matters, I was studying the works of Henry Chadwick, a distinguished clergyman, English clergyman, the Episcopal clergyman, who was a superb scholar. And as a matter of fact, his works are still in print today, but he's a fossil. He's hopelessly out of date. But that's what I had to start with. Himself and Pelikan were the leading scholars, and so I read them both all the way through. What I learned from Henry Chadwick is now as dead as a salted mackerel. I'll explain why in a moment. I'll tell you what it is that died with him. Okay, I say that the remark, the quotation I've just given you, is not to be understood rationally, but it has to be understood intuitively. And the whole of the Gnostic tradition that I'm going to talk about shortly, the whole of it is intuitional in the sense that you reject the rational processes and you leap at the conclusion to the work. Or to the quotation. And your first impression is the most accurate you will ever get. But you do it on the basis of intuition, not rational processes. This is characteristic of the whole movement. All right, you all understood the arisen then, and you must ask yourself whether or not you have yet arisen. Okay, second quotation from the Gnostic Gospels. You will in your life experience many creations. Now, the word, I'll go back to the original word, from the Coptic, goes back to the Koine. I'll give you the original word in the Koine. The word is gnosis, in biblical Greek. Gnosis means creation. And so what the quotation I just gave you from the Gospel of Thomas says that you will in your lifetime experience many creations. But the fact is, you know what creation is. That is, we all went to Sunday school and learned what creation was in Sunday school, and that's the very word that is used. Now, how is it that you are going to, in your lifetime, be exposed to and believe in and participate in many creations? Gnosis is the word in biblical Greek. It is the word, I say, that is used all the way through the four Gospels. What are you going to do with that one? The fact is, don't look bemused. The fact is, on the basis of the flash of perception that you made, you understood as much as you will ever understand about this phrase. Now, it would be useful to stop here and forget the lecture and discuss those quotations. I'll give you one more, a real clincher, a third one, and then we'll get on to the subject matter. But I say it would be profitable to stop and discuss those two quotations. I think that is where one finds in the consensus of the group, whatever the group is, doesn't need to be Christian. The Gnostics were passionate Christians, the devoted followers of Christ. That's all they thought about, and this is why the church had to get rid of them. They were uncontrollable. They could not be controlled. They would not subject themselves to any kind of orthodoxy, and they themselves, the Gnostics, had no orthodoxy whatsoever. They were all over the landscape. I'm going to shortly draw you a picture of their concept of what history is, and it's crazy. It's also quite wonderful. But I'm actually going to draw you a picture of it. All right, the third quotation that I wanted to give you before I turn to the subject proper, the third quotation is, I'm going to break into two parts because I have to explain the central word in the quotation. Look into yourself, this is the quotation, and you will find within that which will save you. That's the word save is the one that I want to emphasize here. Because the word save is in biblical Greek is soteria. Soteria. Now that is the word that is used by Christ himself. Save means salvation. And this is the word that he uses for salvation. In the koine, in the language of Christ himself. This is the verb that is used. Now, I'm going to finish the quotation. I'll start it over again. Look into yourself and you'll discover within that which will save you, provide you with salvation. If you do not look within and discover that which will save you, then instead it will destroy you. That's the end of the quotation. Now, what are you going to do with that? I don't know. I say it cannot be explained rationally. It can be only perceived intuitively. Now, in trying to prepare this lecture material, it's impossible because the subject is so enormous, and so controversial, and so laden with ambiguities that it's difficult to approach the subject in any meaningful sense. I'm going to try. But in any event, these three quotations I've given you are also Buddhist in their temper. Now, I'm not the first to observe that. Elaine Pagel, who published the original book, which is still in print and paperback, by the way, and still where you start. Elaine Pagel's The Gnostic Gospels is the title. It can cost you $10 in paperback. If you want to invest $10 more, you can buy a copy in paperback of her doctoral dissertation, which is a brilliant piece of work. So is the Gnostic Gospels. But in any event, I say that these quotations I've just given to you are Buddhist koans. In 1946 and 47, I spent 15 months in a Buddhist monastery. The Daidarmaji was the name of the monastery. It was in Kyoto, Japan. One of the most important things we learned in the monastery, I was an acolyte along with 19 other Japanese. They didn't speak any English, and I didn't speak much Japanese, but of course I learned it pretty quickly if I planned to have lunch on any given day. But anyway, a central concept for the Buddhists is mu. It translates, it does not translate at all. It translates as nothingness or emptiness or void. But that's wrong. That isn't what it is at all, because that void, that emptiness, is laden with somethingness. It's charged with a powerful field force inside of it. And I think you really have to be locked up in a monastery and exposed to this sort of thing all day, in a very wonderful way. And you can come to comprehend what this is. I'm not going to explain what mu is. But in the tradition of Bushido, the warrior code, it extends to the warrior code. Mu extends all the way through these Oriental civilizations. Mu is what the warrior does when the sword comes up to the shoulder and he prepares to swipe his opponent off the map. What he does is when the sword comes up to the shoulder, he engages in mu, nothingness. That is, he empties his mind. He divests himself of all thought and all human sympathies and all human feelings for an instant. And this is the preparation for the great stroke with which he hopes to cut his enemy in two. Now, it applies to the martial arts, but it also, of course, applies profoundly to Buddhism. The ideal in Buddhism is the empty mirror. You look into the mirror, and what do you see? You see nothing. You see mu, the void. You don't see anything. That's the achievement that you get, the crowning achievement if you become a student of Buddhism. But I say the essence of the teaching of the mu occurs in the koan. You've heard the most famous koan. What is the sound of one hand clapping? The most famous of the koans. But the koans are the primary teaching mode in the monastery. And that is, but you don't perceive them intellectually. You're not permitted that. That is, the monk cop or the monk master who is doing the teaching comes into the students and he throws out the koan. And then he says, you, respond. And you must respond immediately before the rational processes take over. What you do is you get something out at super speed because he has in his hand what is called a perfume board. Now, perfume board is a modified baseball bat. This is raised, as he says, the koan, and if he doesn't get an instant response, he swings. It's heavy, it's hard, it is swung violently across the shoulder blades. It is a searing pain. I have felt a perfume board on more than one occasion because I wasn't fast enough. You must come out with the answer to it immediately, or the answer isn't valid. And this is true of the three quotations I've just given you. That is, they must be responded to intuitively and instantly, and you must divest yourself of all of the rational apparatus that you have. That is, 2 + 2 = 4. You're in trouble already with that, because you see you've made a conclusion. 2 + 2 is 4. By the way, that is wholly arbitrary for the Aztecs. 2 + 2 = 5. And don't struggle to try to prove that 2 + 2 = 4, because it doesn't. It does in this civilization and this society. But 2 + 2 to the Aztecs for about 800 years equaled 5, and they could prove it mathematically. They were brilliant mathematicians. All right. I'm not going to turn to the Buddhism very often because it's distractive, but it is also fascinating. Elaine Pagels says in her most recent book, The Gospel of Thomas, she says that these problems of Buddhism and the connection between Buddhism and the Gnostic tradition is being studied in London, which is the world center for Buddhism. There are about a dozen famous Buddhist institutes there in London. And they're studying formally now the subject of possibly a historical correlation between Buddhism and the Gnostic tradition. Okay, change of subject. What is gnosis? Gnosis simply means usually translated as knowledge. I think that's quite wrong. It isn't knowledge because it is a process. It's knowing. The gerund is where the truth is here grammatically. It's knowing. And by knowing, by engaging the process of knowing, you are engaging in the process of gnosis. You must be aware of the fact that English is the only European language which has one word to know. That won't do. It's inadequate. The English is inadequate in this sense. That is, the word know or knowledge covers the most superficial knowledge, the I know New York. That's the only verb we have. What does this mean? Well, I'm uncertain what it means when I say it in English, but if you're going to say it in any other European language, let's pick Spanish, for example, you have 2 verbs to know. And the first verb, yo sé saber, yo sé Nueva York, means that I know that New York is a city. That's it. That's what that knowledge means. I can, on the other hand, say, conocer yo conozco a Nueva York. That means that I have a personal involvement or personal experience in New York. That is, I can tell where Fifth Avenue is. I can locate Saks for you. I can locate the most famous delicatessen in the world, which is in New York. That is, this is the other meaning of knowledge, the other verb for knowledge, which implies a deep digging onto the surface and participation in the subject that is talked about. This is what gnosis means. Now, the Gnostics, don't hang together. Many scholars say there's no such thing as Gnosticism. I think there is. I think that you can use the generic term to cover a whole span of experiences, and they're all incorporated in the about 100 texts that we have. Anyhow, I don't think I need to linger over what gnosis means. I think you understand that the Gnostics believe, I'll translate it into German, that there is a Verstehen, that is, that there is an understanding that one can have about Christ. That's all the Gnostics talk about. That's all they care about is Christ. That you can have a Verstehen of Christ, but there is also, the Gnostics say, besser Verstehen, a deeper and more profound understanding of Christ. This is what the Gnostics are about. Now, how do they achieve this? I'm going to answer the whole question right off the bat, and then I have nothing more to talk about in the lecture. That is, how do you achieve this? This is because you pursue Christ. You chase Christ, literally chase him, and you subdue him. You enter into the figure of Christ. In Elaine Pagels' doctoral dissertation, she talks about John as a Gnostic gospel, and John is a Gnostic gospel. In John says Christ says to the disciples in the Gospel of John, he says, "I am thee and thou art me." That's it. That's the whole kit and caboodle. I am thee, Christ says to the disciples, and thou art me. That is, Christ and the disciples form into a single encapsulated sentient unit. And that's what it's all about. Now, for the Gnostic, therefore, he spends his life pursuing Christ. Now, whether he catches him or not we don't know. When all is said and done, despite all these Gospels and some brilliant scholars, the two leading scholars are both women. Karen King of Harvard has done some brilliant work. There are incredible minds that work on this. And then, of course, Elaine Pagels, who's now at Princeton and is a distinguished professor of biblical studies there, and has recently opened her own institute with the study of both Coptic and Koine. So if you want to go into the field and study this remarkable phenomenon called Gnosticism, you have to get these two languages in hand. Now, you also need pretty substantial Latin as well. So you need three languages to enter the field, two of which are hopelessly obscure. Biblical Greek, Koine, and the Coptic languages are, after all, you're not going to use them in making your purchases on Fifth Avenue in New York. They're not spoken languages anymore, they're literary languages. All right, so much for this. I'm now going to draw you a picture of the historical concept of what Christianity is. Every civilization has a concept of what history is. The study of this is called historiography. And every civilization has a geometrical projection that it imposes on history and devises a pattern with which to view it. Now, they are not going to go into the subject of the world civilizations and their historiography because it's beside the point in a lecture on Gnosticism. But I'm going to go into the historiography of Christianity itself. Christianity has a unique historiography in that it is linear. It is the only civilization, the Christian culture that I know, that has a linear layout. I'm going to show it to you. This is where we all begin. 4004 BC. This is Bishop Ussher, 17th century, Ussher's chronology. It's symmetrical, it's geometrical. 4004 BC is the creation. 2,000 years later is the flood. 2,000 years after that, you have the figure of Christ. 2,000 years after that, you have the second millennium. And then the 2,000 years after that, 4000 AD, the end of the world. And then in the middle, since we can't wait from the first millennium, the 1000 AD, until 2000 AD, Christianity became very impatient in the Middle Ages, and so they had a mid-millennium in 1500 AD in which the whole world was in turmoil because they thought it was going to end. They could prove it biblically. Anyway, it goes the 4000s over here, the invisible. But that's the end of it. But you can see that the projection is linear. A line goes from one end to the other. From 4004 BC to 4000 AD, and it is geometrical. It leaps by 2,000 years every time. Now, there is another line, a vertical line, a very complicated one. And let's go back here with the figure of Christ. I need here. We'll put Christ up here. And then, of course, before Christ, you get the Old Testament. And then Christ, was after all born a Jew and was a practicing Jew, so he knew his Old Testament as young Jews would and still do. They know it very well. Christ himself attended the yeshiva, as young Jews still do today. And so he was thoroughly indoctrinated by the rabbis on a regular basis in the Old Testament. Okay, after Christ, we get then Q. Q, that's the name of a document. And I'll put it in brackets here, Quelle. It's the German for source. And this is the next event to occur after the death of Christ. That is, the document Q doesn't exist. But the scholars, and they're all in agreement on this, Q does exist, except we don't have a copy of it. That is, it is an amalgamation of certain elements in the Gospels of Luke and Matthew, and it makes them, they have a common source. And the common source is Q, or Kel, but it's called Q. But we have no copy of Q, but many things are being discovered in recent years in biblical archaeology, and Q may turn up yet. But this is the next. Notice I'm drawing a line. It's linear again. What follows after Q? We have the first of the church councils, the 325 A.D., the council at Nicaea, and then that was followed by, they didn't finish. They couldn't get it done. And so in 431, you get the Council of Ephesus. That didn't do it, and so it was followed up in 451 by the Council at Chalcedon. Now, all three of these councils took up the same subject. They took up the Homoousian controversy. Homoousios in biblical Greek means substance. That's the subject of these three councils. The substance is what they fought about. What's that mean? It means, what was the substance of which Christ was made? Literally, what was he made of? Now I'm going to give you the answer to that, because in 180 AD, I'll put this off to the side, we have an astonishing figure emerged. I'll put his name down for you. Irenaeus. Irenaeus is a highly controversial figure. He's a brilliant clergyman. He was the bishop of Lugdunum, which became after 180 A.D. Lyon, France. So he's a bishop of Lyon. And he was involved in these three controversies, these three councils. I say, what is the Homoousian controversy? I say, what is Christ made of? I will give you the Orthodox answer for both Catholics and Protestants. It's very clear. It's laid out in a chart. Christ was, I'm going to define him now, for both Catholic and Protestant, a God first, who became a man and became a God. That's it. God, man, God. That's the substance of which Christ is born or made. Now, there are three possibilities here. First of all, is Christ a God, or is he a man, or is he a combination of the two? You've only got three possibilities. This was fought endlessly and with an enormous amount of bloodshed in all three of these church conferences. What's the conclusion? They never reached a proper conclusion. They reached an orthodox conclusion, which was restless, unsatisfactory, has not been resolved until today. Now, those of you who are Catholics and those of you who are Protestants say, well, just a minute. My minister in my church teaches me that Christ was a God who became a man who became a God. But that is the orthodox answer to it. But that is laid down by the heads of the church, Catholic and Protestant. But it is not satisfactory. It is still a turbulent subject. The 1545, the Council at Trent. It lasted 10 years. What was the subject? The Homoousian controversy 1,000 years later, and they're still fighting about what it is that Christ is made of, literally. And I say it has not yet been fully resolved, despite the fact that there is an orthodox answer. But then I have to take the authoritative point of view and say to you, well, this is the way it is. That's the way it is. Because if you don't respect this orthodoxy, then you're out. Excommunicatio, out of the picture entirely. No Christian is allowed to speak to you or give you the time of day. You are a non-person unless you buy the whole package, all of the Orthodoxy. And the Orthodoxy, I'm not going to go into this, dates back to Irenaeus, who was about to be martyred. He felt that it was coming. We do not today know whether Irenaeus was martyred or not. But he felt that he would be, and indeed the possibilities were very real about this, and he may have been. We just don't have any historical evidence on it. But anyway, he thought before he died he wanted to leave an organized church, because the church was under very heavy assault by the pagan authorities. And so this is why we got suddenly a lurch, a hurricane, a blizzard of orthodoxy, which occurred around 180 AD, and much of it is owing to the work of this one man, Irenaeus. Okay, the 1545, I could go on and on. The 1854, the Ineffabilis, the great church bull promulgated by the Pope Innocent IX, who didn't dare present it to the church, the councils for approval, because it wouldn't have been approved as the doctrine of the Immaculate Conception. Quite recent, I say 1854, the doctrine of the Immaculate Conception fought savagely for 2,000 years and was finally passed by a pope who superseded the work of the church councils and ignored them entirely. I can go on with this line, but you see it is a vertical line which intersects the horizontal line I gave. And so I say Christianity is essentially linear in its vision of the truth and reality. Now, this has become so much academic trash. All of it. Trash. Put it aside. Why? The Gnostic Gospels have changed all of this completely. And we now see the church in wholly different terms. The revolution has occurred in your lifetime and mine. And we now view the church, if you know the Gnostic Gospels, in a wholly different way. How different? Well, in Henry Chadwick, I say this is where I started, and I say you can still buy Henry Chadwick in paperback, and you get the old conventional picture, but I say it's dead as a salted mackerel, because it doesn't matter anymore what Chadwick said. With the advent of the Gnostic Gospels, we view the whole church history in a different way. For 2,000 years, both Catholic and Protestants have said, we look forward to the golden age of the church. What is the golden age of the church for the Catholic and Protestants? It's the 1st century AD. This is called the primitive church. It was not very primitive, but that's the term given to the 1st century AD, when everything was simple and clean and pure. All the lines and all the diagrams were so simple. The church for 2,000 years, Catholic and Protestant, has looked back to the golden age when everything was simple and clean and pure. Everything was in neat, simple little boxes and packages. That's a fiction. The fact is the early church was in complete turmoil. This is demonstrated by the Gnostic Gospels because they are produced in the 1st and 2nd centuries AD, and they are evidence of a great deal of very healthy and exciting turmoil in the doctrines of the church and violent and bloody disagreements. It was not a golden age, it was an age of bloodshed in which people felt so passionately on these matters of Christ and the nature of Christ and the nature of true worship of Christ that there was no reconciliation available whatsoever. That is, the reverse is true. Today, we have uniformity, orthodoxy. So the picture of the church, like this, going back to a single focus, in the golden age, is reversed. That is, this age is the age of orthodoxy and simplicity, where it's all laid out by the Catholic theologians, for the Catholics and by the Protestant theologians for the Protestants. And in the case of the Protestants, they are more inclined to listen to the individual minister than they are to listen to the authorities. But for the Catholics, there is one authority only, and that's the Pope. And that's it. That is the basis of authority. This is the basic difference between Catholicism and Protestantism. As for the Catholic, the source of authority is one single figure. 1925, the church published the doctrine of the infallibility of the Pope, raising hackles all over the world, especially among the Protestants. 1925 is where that doctrine comes from. It's within recent history. Anyway, there is a single authority. For the Protestants, the source of authority is not any individual, but the Bible itself. But the fact is, here we are. We all of us, have Bibles in the home, and we read them. And each of us is his own church and his own pope and his own minister. And so, if we were all Protestants, we'd all end up arguing with each other before the meeting had finished. And so I say there is no single source of authority for the Protestants. Everyone is an authority on the church because everyone can read the Bible. This is the age of literacy. Everyone in the room can read. And everyone views the Bible in a somewhat different way. Okay, let me turn now to some of the things that distinguish the Gnostics. They've disappeared there on the other page. That distinguish the Gnostics from the conventional picture of Christianity. This is why they ended up being extirpated. Extirpus in Latin, to pluck out by the root, is what extirpated means. And the fact is the church plucked the Gnostics out by the root. In 1937, I was a freshman at a university, and the teacher, all students were required to take History 1, everybody. And you were required to take it as an entering freshman. And so the teacher in my class had a pack of cards, written on the backs, and you couldn't see what was in it. And so he went to each student, and each one picked a card. And on the back of the card was the subject of your term paper, and for the course. And so I drew the Gnostic Gospels. In those days, my command of English was quite shaky. I was very uncertain about it. And very uncertain of my own qualifications as a student as well. And so I was terrified by all of this. Anyway, I picked my card, went off to the library, couldn't find anything. And I was desperate. And in panic, I went to the school librarian, who was a famous scholar. So famous that the faculty were scared stiff of him, but I was more afraid than anybody else. And so I went straight to him, and I said, what am I going to do? I said, I can't find anything. And he said, he was a kind man, and was set aside by the fearfulness of his reputation as a scholar, which is very substantial. And he said, I'm going to help you with this. And so I had the head librarian and the school's most famous scholar was going to help me look into the Gnostic Gospels, and he finally ended up being very angry. He said, there is no subject. He said, if I can't find the subject, nobody can, and this is true. And so he said, I'm going to talk to this professor. He said, he should never. I said, please don't. I said, I'm sweating already. And so I wrote the term paper. It took 1 page. And so that's all I could find. I didn't, by the way, large handwriting. And so I was so terrified that I turned my term paper into impersonation so I could apologize and grovel and crawl around the floor. And the teacher took this single page, said, oh my word, he said, you've done very well, he said. This is a wonderful term paper, he said. Why, there's something here I didn't even know. He said, this is clearly a work. I got ready to faint. I felt dizzy. I was going to stumble into a chair. But anyway, this is what we knew. Extirpated, no trace whatsoever until the discovery of the Gnostic Gospels at Nag Hammadi in Egypt 1947. Now, what are the things that distinguish the Gnostics from the conventional picture? The most important distinction is eleutheria. That's from that biblical Greek. I'll put it down for you in case you want to start your studies now in biblical Greek. Eleutheria. It's untranslatable. I'm going to translate it anyway. The eleutheria means joy. This is what distinguishes the Gnostics from all of the conventional Christians of the 2nd century AD is eleutheria. It's a doctrine. They believe that by the pursuit of Christ and the identification with Christ and becoming Christ, that you achieve pure, undiluted joy. A joy which is so intense that it is not describable in human terms. It is pure joy. It is a spiritual thing that infuses the total person, and one is transpired, transfigurated by the joy. And they were carried away by the figure of Christ and the adulation of him, which was the really indescribable. I think I won't attempt to describe it. But anyway, eleutheria was what you reached for. Now, of course, I decided before I organized this talk, I never organized it, because it's too much to organize, but I decided that I was not going to mention Buddhism, but then I'm probably a very sick person and I can't help it. And so they have to mention Buddhism. But anyway, the fact is, eleutheria is mu. It's Buddhist mu. Fascinating. This is unstudied. There's no literature on the subject. Not one line, but it's mu. I happen to know this because I had a wonderful 15 months in a Japanese monastery, which I intended to stay in, by the way, for the rest of my life. But it was a problem. I was too big. I'm 5'10". You know, most Americans today, especially the youngsters, tower over me. But I was a giant in the monastery. The Japanese, 4,000 of them, were stuck to here for me. And I had to get a special tailor to make a costume for me. And the fact is, I was starving to death. The Japanese lived on a handful of rice and 2 crackers a day. The macrobiotic diet, but I was starving to death. Literally. And so the abbot came to me and he said, look, he said, I don't like the way you look, he said. He said, I want you to go every Friday into downtown Kyoto, he said, and write a letter to your mother. And I thought, my mother didn't want me to write her letters or hear from me or anything else. And so I said, and he said, wait a minute. He said, just go downtown and write a letter every Friday. They were sending me off to the local restaurant. And so I go flying downtown in a panic, throw myself into a seat in the restaurant. They got used to me. I used the same restaurant. They could see me coming. The cooks got busy. They began to serve me fish this big, and then I finally ended up with being served a fish that big. The fish weighed 6 or 7 pounds and lasted 30 seconds. I was starving to death. And so after 15 months, I became such a trial and ruined the whole life of the master of the dry flower. He was teaching the philosophy of the dry flower arrangement, which is, I was uneducated at the time and had no background in any theology, including Buddhist theology, and so I simply couldn't master the difficult and complex art of dry flower arrangement. I tried very hard. And my teacher was 104 years old, and he blew up in class. And that finished me off, because he was a wonderful man, and I loved him. I tried so hard to please him, but he blew up. And the abbot called me, and he said, you know what this means? He said, he's lost his karma. And he said, he's lost the Dharma as well. He said, now he said he has to live another 104 years to start back where he left off today. He said, it's gone. And he said, it's a tragedy. He said, not your fault. He said, it's his fault. He said, faulty karma, faulty dharma. I thought, the faulty ocean devil, that's what they called me. Ocean devil, I don't know what that means, but that was the nickname. It wasn't complimentary. Ocean devil, I thought, time to go. And so I marched to the gate and said goodbye with, can you figure this? 4,000 monks followed me to the gate, all weeping. I mean, this is the time to die. I should have died right then. I would have died whole and complete. 4,000 weeping monks. Anyway, out the gate I went because I just was too big, physically, and too small intellectually to fit into this wonderful community.